All right, folks. Well, it's been a little while since I've done a movie review, so I saw a couple movies yesterday. The first one I'm going to review for you is Deadpool. All right, this is a movie that's gotten a lot of attention here in the last couple of weeks leading up to its release, and I didn't get a chance to see it before yesterday, so I didn't see it opening weekend, but everybody else on the planet did, so I'm kind of catching up with this one. But Deadpool, yeah. Just a background. I think I've said before, but I'm not, 100% caught up in the comics, in the history of the character, this character especially, the Marvel, the DC, any of them. I don't read comics for the most part. I'll read about comic storylines, like I've read about some of the X-Men storylines, and I've read, up on some other stuff, but mainly the older 60s, 70s stuff, um, and mainly in Marvel. A couple of DC things here and there, but anyways, just I've read up on them, not have actually sat down and read them. But that's all beside the point. Deadpool for me, and I didn't see the X-Men, what was it, Origins, the Wolverine one, where Reynolds played Deadpool, except it wasn't actually Deadpool from what I hear. So, no comment on that because I didn't see the film. But yeah, Deadpool. I've been hearing all over from different people across the web. It's better than Star Wars, The Force Awakens. It's the best comic book movie we've ever gotten, or it's the best one since the Avengers. I disagree. No, it didn't do it for me in the way that it did it for other people. That being said, it's a good movie. I really enjoyed it, especially the second half, and we'll get into the problems with it in a minute here. But I want to start with what I liked about it. First of all, I like the character Deadpool. First of all, I mean, this was my first big introduction to him. I knew a little about the character just from what people had been describing to me online through videos, reviews, and stuff, which is he is a loudmouth, profane, violent character who doesn't give a shit, and and we haven't really, and since the explosion of comic book movies, starting probably around 2008 with the release of The Dark Knight and Iron Man within the space of 2 months, and then from there, I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe got started. Now DC is getting theirs all ramped up with Batman v Superman, which is only a month and a week away or so, which sounds crazy to me, but anyways, um, yeah. So and everything in between there with we've been hearing things of Sony and their amazing Spider-Man films, which one worked, one didn't so much, and all the stuff in between. And we really haven't seen like an R-rated, devil may care character the way we have with Deadpool. So this was in a way, it's breaking new ground. But at the same time, it's not the first R-rated comic book movie. Nope, we have the Blade trilogy to look to. Oh, what are the other examples I've been hearing? Because yeah, I haven't really anything before 2008 with comic book movies, with the exception of like Spider-Man trilogy and one or two of the X-Men. I really didn't see them, with the exception of the Batmans and the Supermans and those stuff. But yeah, like it took me a few years to catch up with the first Hulk, the Ang Lee Hulk, with Eric Bana, but and I wasn't really all that steamed into it until we've gotten the Marvel universe and now the DC universe, and the Fox universe has been really pushing things lately with minus Fantastic Four, but anyways, there's a couple other examples out there. I just can't think of them, but yeah, Blade I think is just the go-to of and Punisher. There's another one too. So we've had R-rated comic book movies before. Arguably, we've had some that break the fourth wall before. I think there's a couple of moments here and there. Some of the Stan Lee cameos pretty much break the fourth wall, but so yeah, this isn't the game changing never before seen comic book movie that some people are proclaiming it to be. At the same time, yeah, I really like the character and I want to see him pop up in a lot more stuff. And yeah, that's the first thing. And Reynolds, I think this is one of his better performances he's given in a few years. Like, I always go back to what was Buried from a few years ago. I thought he was definitely the best part of the film. For a while there, I really considered it one of the one of the greatest odes to Hitchcock that we've seen in the last few years, and I haven't seen it in a long time now. I'll have to see if that holds up or not. But I remember his performance. I was like, that's something that the Academy should have been looking at that year. It's true, there was Colin Firth and there was Jesse Eisenberg and James Franco in 127 Hours. That was a pretty packed year for Best Actor, but I thought he maybe could have gotten some consideration here and there for that for Buried, even if it was a pretty simple story. And yeah, so this is definitely one of Reynolds' best performances I've seen him in a while. The action sequences I thought for the most part really worked. The Colossus and shoot, I can't remember the other X-Men that they bring into it. Something Warhead or Nuclear Warhead or it'll come to me halfway through the video. And I don't want to look it up because that's cheating. But those two, the way they played off each other, the way they played off of Deadpool, I thought that's a lot of fun. And a lot of the jokes, the more profane, R-rated, totally going balls to the wall jokes, a lot of them land. Not all of them, but a lot of them land, and they're funny. The meta humor, which, the way 22 Jump Street have kind of revised the meta humor a little bit in recent years. There's a couple others, but those two are the prime examples. This is those are funny. Like when they mention, in particular, one other comic book movie that Ryan Reynolds did that didn't pan out well. That was funny. When they mention Hugh Jackman and multiple times, I'll say they'll do it. And they mention Wolverine, and they mention the other X-Men, a lot of those are very funny scenes. And so the humor for the most part works. Even when you look at usually the superhero movies, there's kind of like they're split into three different kind of wedges to make one full circle of a movie, if you get my analogy here. We usually have, the big action scenes. There's usually a point in the movie where the character reaches a low point and they have to rise back up again to confront the enemy and beat him. And then there's usually that third wedge is like a love story. And for the most part, that's usually the weakest of the three. Usually the action sequences are well done, and usually the rise and fall of the character and how they change and stuff is usually done fairly well, if not really well. Sometimes it's done really well, but and that's kind of sort of fits with Deadpool too. So yeah, for story wise, this isn't an amazing new story that we've never seen before in a comic book movie. Yeah, you can trace this to a lot of other films, but and it's an origin story too. So I think we've literally had a dozen origin stories in the last 10 years with these comic book movies. So yeah, okay. But yeah, the love story I thought was actually pretty well done, and I cared more about him getting the girl back and being with his girlfriend or whatever, whose name I'm forgetting. I cared about that, and I wanted to see that happen, and usually you're like, oh, okay, all right, they get the girl in the end, it's the classic trope and stuff, and here they kind of went out of their way to make it a little more cheerable in the end, I guess is the word I'll choose there. All right, and those for the most part really are some of the bigger highlights for me. Some of the weak points in the film. It's an origin story, so we usually get those tropes. We have him, getting his powers, figuring out his powers, getting the transforming himself into the costume and getting the costume right, which they have a couple funny jokes about, but we've seen that in the Spider-Man and Iron Man and what were the other costume ones? I'm trying to think. Anyways, yeah, but we've seen that before, and and I just didn't think they didn't quite have enough of a fresh enough for me at least spin on it to make it this super amazing never before seen comic book movie. No. I'm trying to think what else. Oh yeah, for me, usually I'm a guy who likes my movies in chronological order. Like if you're gonna mess with that and go non-linear, usually for me you have to do it really well. Like even a couple of years ago, one of my favorite films of the year was American Hustle, And that movie, like they start, kind of in the middle, well, not in the middle of the story, but toward what would traditionally be like the end of the first act. And they show the last scene of the first act first to kind of just jump you right in with the characters. And then they go back and it takes a good, 35, 40 minutes to explain how things got up to that point. And then we move on into the second act, right about the time where the second act would usually begin. And that was one of my bigger problems with that movie. I mean, I still love the rest of it, but that was something I was like, couldn't you have just started, at the beginning and just gone through? I mean, I don't know. You're trying to be artsy fartsy, and it didn't. That one I didn't particularly enjoy. There's tons and tons of examples where they'll start somewhere, then they'll backtrack and do this. And Deadpool, not to again, not to give anything away to anybody who hasn't got a chance to see it yet, but they do that here, and it just not to give anything away, but there's a way where they say, okay, we set up, what in this case tends to be like, I would say that the opening sequence is kind of the exact middle of the film, and what would usually be like your middle big action sequence where we kind of see the hero in his first major conflict, now fully formed. He's got the costume right. He's got a handle on his powers, and he kind of saves everybody. Recent examples like Amazing Spider-Man, the bridge sequence where he saves the cab on the bridge, or let's think, probably Captain America, the first Captain America, where he goes in and saves everybody from the Nazi camp, or it's not a Nazi camp, but the Hydra camp. There we go. I couldn't think of it. Um, Even the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, the parade sequence where he battles Green Goblin for the first time, and that's where this movie begins actually. And yeah, we get that thing. Okay, they start it and then they stop and then they go back and explain something. Then it starts up again 10 minutes later, and they do that a couple of more times to get you up to that point, and then it's like from there on, it's like okay, now the third act begins, but it feels like the movie's just starting. It's one of those things, and I really didn't enjoy that. I don't think that worked. I think they should have just. It's okay if you want to start it there. Start the sequence, get like 4 or 5 minutes into it, just to start your movie off that way. And then if you want to go back and explain everything, because they would go back and explain one bit, and they would come back to the action scene, then go back and explain another little bit. For me, it just no, that didn't work. You gotta. It kind of gave me flashbacks to Man of Steel, where they would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth so many times that it almost gave you a headache because you're just like, show me the damn movie in chronological order. Come on. Yeah. Anyways, but I felt like if you had done that once, gone back, explained every last thing, and then let us just finish this action sequence, it would have been better. But instead, they have to do this, do that, go back and forth, and that just put a stopper on everything for me. And right away I was like, oh, please don't tell me that's the whole movie and this is the final scene. It's not. I won't, not spoil too much. But anyways, another problem I had was the villain. This is not a memorable villain. It took me until actually a few minutes ago when the review started. I was thinking, okay, so we have our Deadpool, we have the T.J. Miller character, we have the girlfriend character, we have Colossus and his sidekick trainee, and the villain whose name is, and I couldn't think. And then I thought, okay, Francis. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to remember. His name is Francis, and he's for me just a weaker villain. I mean, he's pretty much exactly the villain we got in. Well, okay, maybe a little bit better, but still, it kind of goes with the Malekith character in Thor: The Dark World, where it's like they talk the big talk, they walk for a second, walk the big walk for a second where they kind of go toe to toe with the hero. Literally, it takes like a minute of screen time in this film, maybe 2 minutes. And then in Thor: The Dark World it was like 4, but whatever. You get what I mean. It's a weak villain, I thought. Couldn't even remember the guy's name 5 minutes after the movie was over. Uh, the motivations of the character I felt were just completely left out of the script. The acting was okay. I don't know the actor's name, but he was okay. Yeah, I didn't enjoy the villain too much. And I think the better your villain is, the more you're going to get from the more you're going to get out of the conflict of the story, and the better it's going to come out. Well, I kind of had the same problem with Guardians of the Galaxy a couple of years ago now, where it's like the villain just kind of shows up, does his thing, and then he gets his comeuppance. Same thing here. Oh man, Marvel's villain woes continue again. I had the same problem with Ant-Man. It's like they talk the big talk, and they get a couple of scenes where they get to be badass, and then that's it. It's done. Still not enjoying that. And I was hoping Deadpool would be an exception to that because I was thinking going into it that maybe Colossus was the villain here. Not to, yeah, again, not to spoil anything, but he's not really a villain. And actually, there's a sequence at the end where he and his apprentice, or whoever that is, the nuclear warhead, or whatever her name is. I know people are screaming at me right now what her name is, but where they kind of team up with him and they kind of go into the final battle. And though that part when they were, there's a part where they're together in a cab, which is funny. There's a part where they're battling the different villains in the end, which was pretty exciting and well done. And for me, yeah, I just got that sense of the second half for me worked better than the first half. Because the first half is where all that back and forth happens. The second half, I think, the movie really finally gets its footing right with the mix of comedy and action. I think at the end of that, at the end sequence, and I mean, it gets its comedy setting right, the comedy footing right. I mean, they know how to push the jokes without going too far, without going into Batman and Robin territory. But at the same time, they know not to be back far enough where where it just doesn't, you don't feel the humor. So I thought they did that better than maybe some of the mix of the other elements in there, which we usually get in these superhero movies. I'm trying to think what else I want to say about it. Yeah. Oh, well, one other thing too is we usually get in some of these films, not all of them, but we usually get a sense of who the supporting characters are without them having to be in every scene that Deadpool's in, or insert hero name here moments. I thought back to the first Thor movie where we learn about Thor and we figure out his whole story, but at the same time we also get to figure out a little bit of who Loki is. A few moments here and there we get to know the Earth characters, the Natalie Portman, Stellan Skarsgård characters. There's a couple other examples I could think of, but that's the one I thought of immediately was that. Here in Deadpool, though, I don't think the girlfriend character ever got a scene where she's not in it with Deadpool. And the villain, I thought, maybe got one scene where where Deadpool isn't there. And, yeah, the TJ Miller character, every scene he was in Deadpool was there. And I feel like we could have gotten to know some of these supporting characters a little more than we did. Like Colossus and his apprentice, again, I was hoping the name would come to me. It's not. They get one or two scenes where Deadpool isn't there, and we kind of get their back and forths, which I thought was great. It's like great. We finally get to see a couple of characters be themselves without Deadpool having to be there to influence them or to drive the conversation. And we got that in the Thor movies. We got that in. I'm trying to think what else. What's another good example here? A couple moments in the Avengers where they're not all together. We get a couple of good scenes, and stuff like that. And then again, you can say, well, this is the first movie. We kind of want to get to know who Deadpool is, sure, but and Avengers is a sequel to all the single films in that universe. But whatever, you get what I mean. I hope. Just that I wish we could have gotten to know the other characters a little better than than we did. Yeah, but overall, I enjoyed the film. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It's a solid 8 out of 10. I really liked like that whole. I think the whole just last act for me really worked, and that's where some of the funniest moments came from. There's a moment where he kind of has to say goodbye to somebody just in case he should fail and not come back, and he kind of has a final line to his roommate, which is really funny. I won't spoil it here if you haven't seen it, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. That was a really funny line without going, and it kind of crossed a line, but at the same time, it was like, who cares? It's funny. Um, they throw in like a Wham song and a Chicago song at the end, which I really I've been listening to lots of '80s stuff lately in music, so that was refreshing to hear. Not just modern music. I mean, and they had some. There's like I think an original piece where they're talking about Deadpool. It was written for the film, which I just heard bits and pieces of in the movie because they have dialogue over it and stuff. But I want to look that up because it sounded like it was pretty funny. And it sounded like they had Ryan Reynolds come in and do some of the like rapping or something. It sounded funny. Um, yeah, like I said, it's just that second half for me worked better than the first half, but still, there's good stuff in there, and I think it's worth seeing, especially if you're a comic book fan. If you're a comic book fan who's kind of been waiting for that next difference, and something that we haven't seen in every last other film. There's elements here that are from every last comic book movie that we've had, but at the same time, the R-rated factor and a couple of points here and there, especially with some of the broader and more adult humor, kind of make it a little more fresh than a couple of the other films. So, yeah, if you're a fan of R-rated comedies, I think Deadpool will probably satisfy you in that degree. Action fans will enjoy this, especially the comic book fans. Especially if you're a Deadpool fan, yeah, you've probably seen it twice already, and you're going to go back and see it more times. Yeah, so 8 out of 10. That's my review. I have another one coming up here in just a second. So we'll get to that in a minute.